Welcome to Transformed, a program where we meet ordinary people who've been transformed by the power of an amazing God. We're going to meet two amazing people today who God has worked in their life through some pretty amazing circumstances, and we're going to hear from them in their own words today about what God has done in their life despite all that's happened. As I travel around to schools and churches over the last 15 years, I've met many people who have been through an abortion experience. And to me that's a real challenge, because I've had to learn how to communicate with them, how to come across as not being judgmental, how to come across in a way that encourages them to think about who they are and to think about the future for their own lives. Because it's so easy to come across as one who judges and condemns for something that in many ways, I guess without any question, is wrong. And yet we can still love that person, we can still encourage that person, we can still give that person hope. And today I want to introduce to you two wonderful people who have a story to tell, a story that will challenge us, a story that will give us hope to know that there are people who have been through these circumstances and have come out the other side and yet still carry some of the pain, some of the regrets, and yet are pressing on with life and are coming to realise that Jesus' promise is real when he said, I've come to bring you life and to the full, abundantly, with a great encouragement that is to us. So I'd like to introduce to you today Laura. Laura.
Hi Bruce.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
And to Dale.
Bruce, thank you.
We've met both of these people in previous programs, and today we're going to hear a lot more about who they are, where they've been, what God's done in their life, because that's the important thing, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Because I don't think you'd be here without some relationship with God.
But for the grace of God.
That's right. And you know, maybe you wouldn't be here at all.
Yeah.
And Laura, maybe you can start for us today and just share some of those things that you'd like to just challenge us with.
I can
Where
do
have you
that,
been?
Bruce.
Where are you now?
Bruce, you've heard my story before, so I'm going to talk to the audience today and tell them a little bit about myself. As you've just heard, my name's Laura. I'm 30. I've had 5 children. Sadly, 3 of my children didn't survive the womb. I've had 2 abortions. The first one happened when I was 15. It was not a choice I wanted to make. It was a choice that I felt was forced upon me by the man who had raped me and gotten me pregnant in the first place. At the time, date rape wasn't a term that was used, it wasn't common. It was, how would you say, taboo. If you have a boyfriend or a husband or a partner who forces themselves on you, it was still considered a part of your duty to endure that. When I felt pregnant, he then told me that I had to abort the child, that I would not be having this child, that if I kept the baby, that he would not support me, that if I left with the child, that he would kill me, and that the child would be left with him. And so, feeling like I had no other option, I agreed. I vividly remember walking into the clinic. I vividly remember getting down on my hands and knees in the little waiting cubicle and praying to God to forgive me for what I was about to do. And yet I still went through with the termination, with the abortion. And it will never be something that is wiped completely from my mind. My second termination happened 10 years to the day after my first. I was exactly the same. gestational stage, 12 weeks. With my third baby, I'd had a son in between. And what bothers me is that, I believe it was Susan was talking earlier in an earlier program about the statistics as to why women have abortions and how in South Australia 98% is it that is for mental health reasons. My mental health issues didn't start until after my first abortion. When I fell pregnant with my third child, I received a phone call from the father, the mother of that first baby, that first baby that I was pregnant with. It was the grandmother, I suppose you could call her, of that first baby. She phoned me up to find out what had happened in that relationship. Why did it fail? And that sent me into a psychological spin. And the second abortion, the reason why that abortion happened was because psychologically I was taken right back into a place where I was once again 15 years old, raped, and forced to do something. I felt like I had no other choice. I had no other support. I felt completely lost. And again, the memory will never, ever leave me. Beyond that, in the immediate period after that second abortion, I became very sick, physically sick. It turned out that the abortionist had missed a part of my child. I became so sick, I needed to go to the hospital. And I was told by the doctor that had I have left the seeking of medical attention for another 24 hours, I would not be sitting here in front of you today. I had an infection from what they called retained product of conception. In other words, a piece of my baby had caused an infection in my uterus so bad it nearly killed me. The risks associated with abortion, psychologically, physically, emotionally, are very, very real.
Yeah.
I'm very lucky to be here. I had managed for a very long time to push aside any of the negative feelings that I had towards both of my abortions. I felt guilty, I felt shame, I felt regret, remorse, repulsion even at myself for what I had done. But I didn't allow myself to feel those feelings until I had a very late miscarriage in May last year. I found out at 20 weeks that my baby growing inside of me had passed away at around about 18 weeks gestation. And overwhelmingly, his birth, the experience of his birth, was very much the experience of both of my abortions, except I gave birth naturally to him. On the second to last push before he was born, I shouted out, I should have fought harder for those babies. All of my grief, all of my anger, all of my trauma caused by the first two losses, those two abortions, came screaming out of me with my dead child. I became very sick, mentally ill, and I attempted suicide twice last year. Using the mother's mental health as reason for abortion is wrong. First of all, it is not a reason, because abortion is likely to cause mental health problems. Second of all, more often than not, the reason for mental health issues with the mother is given for social, economic, financial or educational pressures that she feels from everybody else. We can't keep doing this to our young people. We can't keep doing this to our next generation. We can't take away the choice, but it's never informed. If it's really a choice, where is the options that are provided to those women? Where is the education in our schools, which Bruce and Choices of Life provides? We need more of in our schools to educate young people about the value of life, about the other options that are available to them besides abortion. There are choices. We want them to make the right choices.
So the phrase of, I wish someone had told me.
I wish someone had told me.
The truth.
The truth.
And
Definitely applies to my situation.
not just told you the truth, but actually provided some basic support
Real
for you.
Basic, practical support, physical support. I needed to be out of the abusive situation I was in. I needed more counselling prior to the first abortion taking place and the second abortion taking place, where it was seen as having a social worker or a psychologist come in and say, okay, have you tried this? Have you thought about adoption? Have you thought about the practical support that's available through different agencies?
Yeah,
and
none of that.
None of that at all.
I was just told, oh, well, it'll be over and gone.
It'll be over and
don't
done
worry.
with. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
The truth, as we call it, and the truth when you ask the question of, you know, did somebody tell you the truth about what would happen? They tell you about what will happen to your body. They don't tell you what will happen to your mind, what will happen to your baby, what will happen to your emotions, or what will happen to your relationships.
So they claim counselling happens within the abortion clinic?
They do claim that counselling happens within the abortion clinic. The level of counselling consists mainly of a nurse or a clinical nurse asking why you want to have an abortion.
And that's about it?
That's about it.
Other than that, they say, you sure you want to do this? And off you go?
Yes. And even through tears, when you say yes, even if you're saying yes through tears, they won't ask the question again.
I've heard of some people even pleading the doctor to stop, and
they don't. Yeah. The majority of terminations that happen, of abortions that happen in Australia now, are done under general anaesthetic. And I can only guess at the reason as to why that is. You can't ask the doctor to stop. Because once you're asleep,
that's it.
That's it.
Dale, I believe your story from a male point of view is probably quite similar.
Yes, it is.
But you've had but I've realised that every story is different. It doesn't matter, you could have 100 people in here that have been through an abortion experience, they're all going to be different. And yours is different, and there are certain factors about yours. And there's things that happened later in your life, you know, only a matter of a couple of years ago, that brought home to you the reality of what you'd done that almost 30 years ago. So would you like to just share a little bit with us?
Yeah, it's actually interesting, Laura. Something you just mentioned about being pressured in. I'm sitting here. I'm almost getting the feeling that I am the perpetrator of what happened to you, because it was me that coerced my then partner to have that abortion. Actually, 2 abortions. And it's actually quite sobering to sit here and listen to you talk and realise that, hang on, she's talking about me. Okay, different guy, same circumstances, so basically we are the same. And yes, Bruce, you're right. I did coerce my partner into having 2 abortions.
You were married at the time?
No, we were not.
Not?
I've always accepted her as wife, but I mean, under God, we were not married. It's as simple as that. But the hard part is to realise Laura made an interesting point, and I had an imagination of a box of rat poison. My belief is, if you do not tell somebody 100% of the truth, it is not the truth. It is only a fraction. Now, I use the analogy of the rat poison, that 98% of rat poison is edible food. We could probably stick it with a bit of milk and chew it in a bowl. But 2% is fatal, it is deadly. You consume it, you will die. And that is the trouble. What they're doing is they're presenting part of the truth, but they're not presenting the poison. And the poison is that, as Laura just so bravely declared, at determination, you get up, you go home, it's supposed to be over. That is what they say. They point out that some women will have a few side effects. That is a lie. Your evidence proves, and I'm sure this is probably on your website, that it is not a few, it is by far the majority. In fact, if the truth was told, more women and men would come out and say, hey, yes, I've been affected by this. This has really, really hurt. It has devastated this, it has devastated that. And so what seemed right in the beginning, probably taken as the only option, in reality is something that you have to live with. Yes, it was 30 years ago, or very close to 30 years ago, that I did what I did. And it's only been in the last probably 5 months, 6 months, that I can actually honestly say that I am forgiven. Because even though I knew God had forgiven me, I could not forgive myself.
So you live with that guilt?
Absolutely. I just couldn't. And David made an interesting statement. He said that, I think it was Psalm 51, where he said that my sin is always before me. It didn't matter where I was, what time of the day, what time of the night. That would come back to me over and over again. And the thought was devastating. And the thought that used to go through my mind was, and I'd look at myself in the mirror and say, how can you call yourself a man? A man's job as a father is to protect his child. And you have taken your children and sacrificed them. And that has haunted me. I can't begin to speak of how that has haunted me. And I guess in a way it's been worse for me because I've had and you know this because I got them through your ministry, 2 specific DVDs about actually what truly happens during a termination process. And as I say, God had to do a miracle in my life because I could not forgive myself. I just couldn't. It was just too much. And I guess if I could say anything to your listeners that are talking, there is forgiveness. There is only forgiveness through Jesus Christ. He has to come into that place, and He will come into that place. Nothing is unforgivable. He can forgive. Not only will He forgive, He will heal you, and He will set you free. And then He will use you to go and talk to others, not with judgmentalism like Bruce mentioned before, but with the love that Jesus told us to hand out to people. It doesn't matter what you've done. He will forgive you. He will deliver you. He will set you free. And I guess if people hear nothing other than those few words, then my job here is done. So yeah.
Yes.
And you had a circumstance
Yeah.
a couple of years ago.
Nearly 2 years ago, 21 months actually. My youngest daughter, she got pregnant, and she had an ultrasound. I didn't go with that one. I went with her mother, took her to the ultrasound. And basically it was a death sentence. And the option was you either terminate or the baby will die. I mean, there was no other options to her. And so even though I prayed over her, and I believe with everything in me that the baby was healed, I was then concerned about my daughter. And so as it transpired, I took her for the final, as it was the final ultrasound. And the doctor did the ultrasound and then hung the paddle up on the machine and calmly said, "The baby's dead, sorry." And we were devastated. We were just absolutely gutted. But as I said to her a little bit later, after we tried to gather our composure, bearing in mind I took my daughter home with a dead infant, and you know that, Laura. You know what that's like.
I know what that's like.
You know. And I made my daughter a promise. I didn't know where I was going to get the money from. No idea. And God provided that, praise God. That I said, look, we are going to have a funeral for this child. Because of her situation, she ended up cremating the child, and she has the urn with her. She's not prepared to release that yet, and that's fine. I told her whenever, that's fine.
So that's all been very, very important in
It's been very
your
important,
life.
yeah. It's been very important in her healing, because the thing is that, like, I mean, we had a discussion off camera earlier that, you know, you can't say, well, okay, there's 4 weeks, there's your grieving period, that's when it starts, that's when it finishes, that's it, it should be, it doesn't work that way. Sometimes it is years, and God knows that. He's bigger than all of that. She named him after one of the Old Testament prophets. And, but I want the people to know this, if I may, Bruce. She spent the night in the hospital, we arranged everything. She spent the night in the hospital when she had to deliver. She was put in like a birthing suite at one of our, actually my own local hospital. And anyway, she delivered the baby. And but the interesting thing about it is when they took the baby and they did a couple of tests, and then they brought this little boy back. He was 21 weeks. And I stood and watched my daughter stroking this child's face and holding his hands and feet. I mean, this was a baby. Small, yes, but it was perfectly formed in almost every way. But looking at that, my daughter looking at her child, it wasn't in disgust, there was just absolute love. To her, as a mum, that child was alive.
It's an amazing
it was
thing.
It was amazing. I've never seen anything like it. I've seen a lot of things in my life. I've never seen anything like that in my life. But just to see that love.
A wonderful, wonderful thing.
Oh, it was, I wouldn't trade it for the world.
Yeah, and this is one of the reasons why, and you both share in this, the need to tell that truth to young people. And what I want to bring now is our young lasses from Passion for Life, who tell stories about some little babies that have been saved.
Yeah.
That's
Your life has been saved, as it were, through the stillbirth of your little grandson.
Yeah. And by the way, just to interrupt, I've got 2 more grandchildren on the way.
Wonderful, wonderful.
That is wonderful
Thank you,
news.
appreciate that. Yeah, quite proud of it myself, even though I had nothing to do with it.
And Laura, you know, it's just an amazing thing to see your life as getting on track, and God's doing something in your life to bring you to the point where you can do something, and despite all that's happened in the past.
God has done amazing things in my life in the last, especially the last 6 months.
Wonderful.
Opportunities have been coming my way that I never ever imagined.
Yeah. Because it's only about the 4th or 5th time that you've actually told your story.
It
in a public
is.
sense
I think it's the 5th time. The very first time was at the youth camp. To 350 teenagers. I can tell you I was terrified that day. And yeah, today's the 5th. Yeah. There is something before we go that I would like to say, if I may, to Dale. You mentioned earlier that you felt like you were the perpetrator against me. And I want you to know that I've forgiven him as God would, and I forgive you too.
Thank you.
And I pray that the mother of your children, who now reside with God, forgives you also.
Yeah. Thanks, Logan. I appreciate that.
Okay.
It's a wonderful thing as we hear these stories to know that there is a God who forgives. There's a God who loves and a God who cares for us. And as I said, I'd just like to share a couple of stories. There's the young girls from Passion for Life who tell some stories about lives that were actually saved through telling the truth. And I want to bring to you Olwen, who has been involved in some post-abortion counselling as well, and she's going to share some of her stories with us and some of her experience that we can actually take on board to encourage others who are, I guess, trying to struggle with some of these sort of issues in their own lives. So let's listen to what they have to say.
We believe that teenagers need to be informed about how their decisions will affect not just themselves but the people around them, and how that decision can be a long-term decision that will affect them in the future. A pregnancy doesn't last just 9 months. A pregnancy will affect someone for the rest of their life, whether or not they choose to have an abortion, which would result in the absence of a child forever, or whether or not they choose to keep the child, which would result in presence forever of that child.
Young people these days often shy away from responsibility, so I think we need to help equip them with support and knowledge so that they feel capable to have the responsibility of an unplanned pregnancy.
A few years ago, before we came in contact with you, Bruce, we weren't really sure about all the effects of abortion or about life before birth, but when you really gave that information to us, we really knew then where we stood in abortion, and we had such a passion about it. And that's why we then did the fundraising walk to raise awareness and to equip teenagers who might face unplanned pregnancy. And we think it's important that these teenagers know the information that we were shown so that they can make a choice that is educated. We know we can't take that choice away from them at the moment with abortion being legal, but we can give them an educated choice so that they don't make a decision that they will regret later on. And we know that this generation, what we believe about abortion will affect the next generation, whether abortion is encouraged and if it's an option to them. So we think it's important that we give out this information about pregnancy and life before birth, so that when they decide what they believe about abortion, it's based on fact and it's not just based on what they've heard and not actual fact.
We started up an organisation called Passion for Life to help bring awareness to the issue of abortion and to help inform people so that they could make wise decisions. So it's 4 of us who we walked 90 kilometres across the Blue Mountains, just to give that knowledge to people.
And I think we also feel that because we know about abortion and the effect that has on people, not just first-hand but like we hear second-hand information, I think it's vital that we share that, because we have no excuse now that we know.
We've come across women who just changed their mind about having an abortion when they were in an unplanned pregnancy, just by knowing the facts. That in itself really changed their mind. And we can offer a small amount of support, but at a young age we can offer those facts. And if that means that a life has a presence on earth and that a heart no longer has to experience maybe grief throughout its life, then we're going to do that. We're going to give that information that would save that life and that heart.
I had one friend in our last walk. She was 15 and she was in a bit of an abusive relationship, and she became pregnant. And her parents kicked her out of home when they found this out, and she was, as you would expect, really nervous and all over the place, and everyone just assumed that she would have an abortion because that's the done thing these days. But my friends and I will be able to talk to her and just tell her the facts, that the baby is alive, that it's a life, and that it can feel pain and that it has emotions, and the effect that it would have on her if she did go through with it, and the regret that she would most likely feel when she could stop and think about her decisions. So we were able to talk to her, and now she has 6-month-old little twins, and they're just the love of her life. She's so happy, and it's not easy for her. Like, we're not trying to say that having children really young or in difficult circumstances is an easy choice, but it is one that is really worthwhile, and we see that in her every day, the fact that she has just blossomed and that she has no regret. You know, it's hard, but you know, she's so happy, and her little ones may become people who really bless other people in this country. So
Yep. Such a real issue. Like, we've been faced with the reality of it so many times, and I think for Liana and I, who are sisters, it really came into focus on, I think, our first walk. My brother's girlfriend had fallen pregnant, and we had found out through it secondhand, and we weren't supposed to know that. So it was really hard for us because we couldn't help them or tell them, because then we'd be kind of intervening, which in that kind of a situation, you know, we didn't want to put any more pressure on them. And by the grace of God, they actually rang up and told us, and we spoke to them the next day. And that previous week we'd seen you, Bruce, and you know, told us the facts and informed us, and in doing that we were able to inform my brother's girlfriend, who has now got a beautiful son, and he's about 2 now, and just the beauty of that. Yeah, he's been a massive blessing to us, and yeah, the impact of it has really, you know, left a mark on our lives, but we love him so much.
I think having the issue of abortion raised in our own family helped us to have more compassion towards the women and the families that are involved with abortion, rather than come across as in a harsh way, because we also understand the guilt in abortion when that happens. And through meeting various people, especially along the walk, we met one lady, and she at first was a bit upset about what we were saying, but then as we tried to show her we were trying to support women and help them so they didn't make a decision they regret but felt supported, she opened up to us and told us all this stuff about how she had had abortions before and how she really did feel the absence of that child. And we also came across this other man who was very upset about what we're doing, but as we kind of came across and told him that we weren't trying to be harsh or anything, he opened up again and said that his wife had had 8 abortions and he was older and had no children. He was very upset about that, but he felt he had no choice in the issue. So we don't want to come across as really harsh, but we want to give out the information so that they do feel supported and educated, and not that they feel like condemned, because already we know that, especially in young pregnancies, that a lot of women are looked down upon if they are pregnant young, but we don't want to make them feel that then they have no way out of it to have an abortion, but to feel supported, like they can put the baby in a home, like an adoption, or even just raise a child, and just give them those options so they don't feel pressured into doing something they don't even want to do always.
I think the most important thing about people who are seeking healing, seeking counselling around post-abortion, is that they need to want to engage or participate in any program of counselling or healing. But equally, I want to say that many people don't know that there is healing for them after they've had an abortion, and that's for both men and women. And so I think the important thing is that more people know about that there is healing available, that the Lord wants to bring His mercy and His grace upon their lives, and to release them from the shame and the guilt that they undoubtedly feel. So I think that living in guilt and shame is a difficult place to come out of, and many times people are in denial. So part of the issue around post-abortion counselling and healing is that people need to want to come and need to want to engage and participate. But as I said before, equally, they also sometimes don't know that they can access healing. And there is a real deep healing that can come about through counselling and healing for after abortion. In a nutshell, we can assure them of confidentiality, that their face won't be known, that they won't be known to have had an abortion, to be involved in an abortion, and that, you know, their worries, their concerns, their shame, their guilt will only be known between the counsellor and themselves, or within the group that they may be attending to go through a healing program. So I think confidentiality is really fundamental to any counselling or healing program that is offered to people who seek it. So I think that has to be the fundamental thing. And then that they will be asked to, I think it's also information, that they need to be given information about what a counselling program might look like, what a healing program might look like, that they will be given the opportunity to repent of their sin and to be forgiven, and that the Lord can and will forgive them and release them of the shame and guilt that surrounds their abortion, and can release them into a real life, that they will be free of the guilt and the shame that they feel, and that they will also be buoyed up by the Lord's love and by the works of the Holy Spirit in their lives. I think also it's helpful to let them know that, particularly in a Christian-based post-abortion healing situation, that we will be referring to the Bible. We will be asking for the Lord's involvement in their healing, and I know that with some counselling programs that's sometimes not the case, but with the experience that I've had, that it's understood that the Lord will be part of the process, and that this is openly discussed and shared with the participants in the course, and that has really made a huge difference in terms of their healing and also their engagement, and the speed at which they're more able to understand that they are forgiven, that they are released, that they are healed, because the Lord and the Holy Spirit is bringing them to that place where that is possible.
Praise God for the testimony of the Passion for Life girls and the lives that have been saved because of they're just being willing to speak and willing to tell the truth to someone who was maybe trying to decide what they were going to do about the pregnancy that they were faced with. Amen. And it's just wonderful to see what they did. And Olwen, just her openness about being able to talk with people who have been through an abortion and how we can help others who are struggling too after the abortion experience, and being willing to listen and being willing to share in their grief with them. Mm-hmm. So thank you for sharing with us in those things, and you're part of it, Dale. You've just been a tremendous part of our program tonight. We just appreciate that, and Laura, just great, because these experiences are not things that you want to keep remembering, but for the sake of others, you're telling them. And that's why, as Choice of Life, we go into schools, so that the children that we speak to don't have to go through these same experiences that you've been through. You wouldn't want anyone else to do that, would you?
Absolutely not.
You don't want to be there. And so as we speak to them in their teenage years, we trust that this information will make an impact for them, and that if there's life-changing decisions ahead, they'll make the right decisions. And that's so important.
I'll continue to pray for that every day of my life.
And thank you for that, because we need to pray for our young people. And as you listen to this video, I trust that you will pray for people like Dale, for people like Laura, who have struggled with these issues and are still struggling in many ways with these issues, and the regret doesn't seem to go away. But also pray for our young people who will grasp the significance of these issues. They will grasp the significance of the value of the life in the womb. They'll grasp the significance of who they are and the decisions they make that will have an impact on them for the rest of their life. So will you pray with us, and will stand with us, and contact Choices of Life if you feel that you would like to be involved in some way in this ministry that will bring our society to the point where abortion will become as unthinkable as slavery.